62 years ago, a woman in Los Angeles vanished without a trace right inside her own family's funeral home, leaving her husband and 4 young children in utter terror and confusion. Authorities suspected she might have left on her own due to marital stress, but with no body, no traces, and almost no leads to pursue, the investigation ultimately stalled. Yet, through all those years, one retired investigator couldn't let the case go. He believed something was buried behind the darkroom wall of the funeral home. Then one day, when the old property was demolished, a seemingly meaningless detail emerged, a patch of wall with a different color, and from there, the entire truth began to be dragged out of the darkness, shocking the entire Glendale community. Before diving deep into this shocking story, let us know where you're watching from. And if you love real true crime cases, don't forget to hit subscribe so you don't miss the next part. In the summer of 1963, Los Angeles was a city growing fast, where high-rises sprouted along the boulevards, and the quiet residential areas of Glendale still held on to the peaceful charm of old suburbs. In the evenings, the humid air lingered in the narrow alleys, mingled with the sound of cicadas, radio tunes playing soft music, and occasionally the distant rumble of a train. On Franklin Avenue, the Rosewood Mortuary stood with its white-painted facade and a silver sign faded by the years. The Rosewood family lived right above the workspace. The ground floor was the funeral parlor, the basement housed the embalming area and darkroom, and the upper floor was the living quarters for Michael and Janet Rosewood. Michael was known in the Glendale community as a careful, discreet worker who was always present at major funerals. He lived with his wife, Janet, a 34-year-old woman described as gentle, thoughtful, and always quietly supporting her husband's work. The two had been married for nearly 15 years and led what was seen as a stable life, with few conflicts or troubles. On a Friday night in mid-August, the air around the funeral home was thick with the smell of formalin, a scent familiar to anyone in the trade. Janet stayed in the basement to rewash a few rolls of funeral film she had helped process during the week. The darkroom was deep at the end of a narrow hallway, lit only by a dim red bulb. Upstairs, Michael was still in his office, organizing paperwork for the next morning's service. Neighbors said they saw the red light from the darkroom glowing through the door crack all evening, and Janet was the last person seen going down the stairs, holding film rolls and a thin shawl. After that, the house fell silent. No one heard footsteps coming back up the stairs. No one saw Janet leave the property. Around dawn, Michael assumed his wife had gone to bed, but when he woke up, she wasn't in the bedroom. The front door was still locked from the inside, Janet's car was parked in the yard, and the darkroom light was off. On the dining table, the coffee cup she usually used still had lipstick smudges, and the chair was pulled out from the table as if someone had just gotten up in a hurry. Michael searched the entire basement, the chapel, the storage areas, but found no sign of her. When he asked neighbors and a few acquaintances, no one had seen Janet all night. Her absence became more inexplicable with every passing hour. By nearly noon, after multiple fruitless searches, Michael Rosewood contacted the Los Angeles police to report that his wife was missing. The call was logged in the duty book that afternoon. 2 patrol officers were dispatched to Rosewood Mortuary, where Michael was waiting at the front door, looking tense but calm. He said his wife had stayed in the basement, working in the darkroom all evening the previous night, and this morning she was nowhere to be found. So he had searched the whole house, asked neighbors, and a few acquaintances, but no one had seen her since the evening before. The officers took his statement and conducted a full inspection of the property. The ground floor, where the funeral parlor and office were, was neat, with no signs of rummaging or disturbance. Windows and doors were locked from the inside, locks intact, no pry marks. The bedroom on the second floor was in a similar state. The bed was made. The closet had no missing clothes. No personal items were gone. Michael confirmed Janet hadn't taken her purse, wallet, Idaho, or car. Her gray car was still parked in the backyard, keys left on the kitchen table. On the dining table, the coffee cup had lipstick smudges. The chair was pulled out, as if someone had stood up suddenly. There were no signs that Janet had left through the front door or the side door connected to the workspace. The initial report was drafted on-site, classifying the case as missing adult family context. Due to the unique nature of the location, a funeral home, the department assigned it to an experienced detective. Detective Frank Delgado received the file late that afternoon. He arrived at the scene with a forensic technician to document the space and take evidentiary photos. In the basement, Delgado noticed the darkroom door was ajar, the red light switch still on, and the strong smell of formalin spreading through the hallway. He noted a few damp streaks on the concrete floor near the stairs, unclear if from a water leak or something else. The chemical shelves were neatly arranged, no signs of breakage, just a few open solution bottles without caps. Delgado documented every area in detail, marking the damp spots with preliminary symbols and taking photos for the file. He asked Michael to recount the exact last time he saw his wife and confirmed he heard no unusual noises that night. The husband answered steadily, saying Janet often stayed in the darkroom late, sometimes working alone to avoid noise. He insisted there had been no arguments or incidents that evening. Delgado continued checking the yard, garage, and back gate. No strange footprints, no dropped items. The entire property was separated from neighboring homes by a high fence, making it unlikely for an intruder to enter undetected. At the end of the inspection, he filed a report, house intact. No signs of struggle, no evidence of departure, no proof the victim left voluntarily. In his private notes, he wrote, basement area has darkroom light on all night, heavy formalin smell. Before leaving Rosewood Mortuary, Delgado requested additional panoramic photos of the basement, handed over to the forensic imaging unit. He also noted in the file that Janet Rosewood hadn't taken papers, wallet, or car, and suggested monitoring bank accounts, post offices, or hospitals for any contact signs. The scene report was signed and closed at 5 p.m. that day, marking the official start of the Janet Rosewood missing person domestic context file. Immediately after the missing person file was opened, the Los Angeles Police Department launched a large-scale search plan in the area around Rosewood Mortuary. A team of investigators coordinated with local police to sweep the entire Glendale Boulevard stretch down to Echo Park, including residential areas, parks, bus stops, and private motels. Patrol teams worked shifts, cross-referencing the missing persons list, and sent Janet Rosewood's description to area stations. They also contacted hospitals around the city to check for unidentified female patients admitted that night or morning, but all results were negative. The team went to the Greyhound bus terminal and Union Station, common spots for sudden departures. Passenger lists were manually checked, with no Janet Rosewood or matching descriptions. Private motels around Echo Park were visited, but no one recalled renting a room to a woman fitting the description. Meanwhile, police reviewed telegraph records and postal services to see if Janet had contacted or mailed anyone in the days prior, but nothing unusual turned up. From the next afternoon, the area around the funeral home was designated an expanded search zone. Police forces, along with a few neighborhood volunteers, combed vacant lots and the ditch running along Glendale Road, but found no traces indicating anyone left the house that night. By the end of the weekend, the search radius extended 5 miles south, including a small industrial area and abandoned parking lots near Echo Park Lake. The summary report noted, no physical traces, no direct witnesses, no suspicious activity in the area. In the following days, Michael Rosewood actively assisted police by providing information. He gave portrait photos and Janet's description to the team: average height, brown hair, often wearing light-colored blouses and simple office skirts. Under police guidance, the Rosewood family printed and posted missing person notices at gas stations, grocery stores, and nearby neighborhoods. A few local papers like the Glendale News Press and Los Angeles Herald-Examiner ran short articles inside, Glendale woman mysteriously missing, Janet Rosewood, 34, wife of Rosewood mortuary owner. The articles just summarized the events, raised no suspicions, and barely drew public attention. No one called with tips or recognized the woman in the photo. Internally, the case was assessed as lacking clear criminal elements, but Detective Frank Delgado still requested continued sweeps around the funeral home. He and another officer rechecked the back gate, parking area, and surrounding wall, measuring distances from the basement to the side exit. Everything remained as in the first inspection. No new footprints, no fabric scraps or foreign objects. The plumbing behind the house was open to check for leaks, but nothing unusual. Delgado returned to his office, reviewed the scene photos and initial reports, and noted no evidence of victim leaving voluntarily, nor signs of external entry. Scene too clean, not reflecting normal living activity. He attached this supplemental note to the missing person file before submitting it to Central Investigations. By the end of the second week since Janet vanished, no new data emerged. Family, friends, and neighbors all said they received no letters or calls from her. The official search was scaled back, maintaining only passive information monitoring. In the final summary note of this phase, Delgado concluded there was no evidence Janet Rosewood had voluntarily abandoned her current life. 3 days after the expanded search yielded no results, the Los Angeles Police Department approved Detective Frank Delgado's request to bring the forensic team back to re-examine the scene at Rosewood Mortuary. The goal was to thoroughly inspect the basement, the last place Janet Rosewood was seen. The re-examination began early in the morning, with 3 technicians and a scene photographer present. Michael Rosewood was asked to temporarily leave the work area for the inspection. The funeral home basement had an L-shaped layout, divided into 3 spaces: tool storage, chemical preservation room, and the dark room at the end of the hallway. Delgado ordered full video recording of the space before evidence collection. The first photos captured standout details: low ceiling, gray-painted walls, concrete floor with old water stains. When the darkroom light was turned on, the smell of formalin and ammonia became overpowering, requiring technicians to wear specialized masks. They began collecting floor samples from the damp areas Delgado had noted in the preliminary report. Samples were taken at 3 spots, near the stairbase, in front of the darkroom door, and against the wall behind the film washer. The dampness had no clear color, surface dry, but under UV light showed faint glowing patches. All were vacuumed and sealed in labeled tubes. In the darkroom corner, a technician found a long hair strand caught on the metal door hinge. The hair was picked with tweezers and placed in a separate evidence bag with position code. Checking the darkroom door, Delgado noted multiple thin scratches along the metal edge, like from repeated hard object scrapes. He measured and noted in his notebook, marking the spot with white paint. On the wall behind the film washer, there was a patch of newer, brighter paint, about 1 square meter. Tapping lightly with a rubber mallet produced a denser sound, not hollow like surrounding walls. Delgado ordered close-up filming with scale ruler, but did not drill due to lack of expanded search warrant. The team continued, dusting and scanning for marks on the concrete, but found no clear footprints, only 2 faint parallel skid marks running toward the hallway exit. A technician suggested the skids could be from a heavy object dragged across, but the floor was too old to date formation. Additionally, no blood, fabric fibers, or mechanical conflict signs were recorded. Delgado checked the darkroom workbench. Chemical bottles, neatly lined, labels clear, but 2 formalin solutions uncapped. He noted this, possibly due to careless habit or mid-use. On the table were a few unprocessed film pieces and a rubber glove, but nothing notable. All samples were carefully collected, sealed, and coded per protocol: floor samples, hair, paint chips, and overall photos. After completion, Delgado and the lead technician reviewed the report for all signatures. In the summary note, he described, "Basement scene shows no struggle signs, but abnormal physical details exist: concrete floor with faint skid marks, darkroom wall with newer different color paint patch, metal door with multiple parallel scratches. Formalin smell excessively strong, Lacking legal grounds for wider inspection or structural dismantling, Delgado only proposed sealing the basement and sending all samples to LAPD evidence storage for analysis. He also requested large-format film shots of every room corner for official file archiving. Before leaving, he rechecked the basement door, sealed it with numbered tape noting date and time. The detailed scene report was drafted that afternoon, totaling 7 pages with 12 photos. In the temporary conclusion, Delgado wrote, "No direct evidence proving criminal act, however structural features and physical traces suggest possible post-disappearance intervention." The file was transferred to the department's main office for storage. Samples were sealed and sent to Central Headquarters Evidence Vault, numbered per regulation. The inspection ended at 4:45 p.m. that day, confirming no new data beyond the minor signs noted in the report. After completing the basement crime scene inspection report, Detective Frank Delgado proceeded to the next step in the investigation process, collecting statements from individuals directly related to Janet Rosewood's disappearance. He started with the husband, Michael Rosewood, as he was the last person known to be with the victim on the night of the incident. The interview took place at the ground floor office of Rosewood Mortuary the following morning, in the presence of an officer taking minutes. Michael arrived on time, dressed neatly, with a calm demeanor. When questioned, he recounted the events in clear sequence that evening. Janet stayed in the basement to develop film. He worked in the office, went to bed around midnight, and discovered the next morning that his wife was no longer in the house. Throughout the nearly 2-hour session, Michael showed no signs of confusion, spoke calmly, and answered questions without hesitation. Delgado asked several repeated questions to check for consistency, but the statement remained unchanged. He could not pinpoint the exact time Janet went to the basement, only recalling that when passing the stairs, he saw the red light in the darkroom still on. Regarding their marriage, Michael stated that he and his wife had occasional minor disagreements due to work pressure, but nothing serious. He said Janet sometimes felt tired and wanted to go out for a walk to relax. Delgado noted in the report, statement consistent, no signs of stress or evasion. After concluding the interview, the investigator moved on to meet the mortuary employees who had worked with Michael during the week of the disappearance. Of the 6 total, 3 worked the evening shift, including a technician, an embalming assistant, and an office worker. All stated that Michael let them leave early, around 8 p.m. that day, citing no funerals scheduled for the next day. No one stayed to work beyond that time. One employee, Harold Mendez, recalled seeing Janet in the office area late in the afternoon. She asked about some film rolls needing development, then took them down to the basement. He left the mortuary about an hour later and did not return. When Delgado asked about the work atmosphere between the Rosewoods, all agreed they rarely argued. Janet was described as quiet, reserved, but always polite, while Michael was seen as controlled, never raising his voice at work. One employee noted that Janet usually did not go out in the evenings unless working in the darkroom. Delgado then proceeded to the neighboring residential area to interview neighbors. Most residents around Rosewood Mortuary were familiar with the Rosewoods, having lived there for many years. An elderly couple living across the street said they saw the red basement light glowing through the window all evening, turning off late at night, but heard no unusual noises. A woman living 2 houses away said she saw Janet's car still parked in the yard early the next morning, leading her to assume she was home. No one witnessed strangers entering or leaving the area that night. When compiling the statements, Delgado found all information stable, with no major contradictions. He noted in the report that the husband was cooperative, providing full information, and employees and neighbors confirmed the evening was normal, with no unusual sounds or activity detected. However, he also noted one noteworthy detail: everyone mentioned the absolute quiet of the house. No one heard any noise from the basement, even though the film developing equipment and ventilation fans normally produce distinct sounds. Delgado made no judgment, simply noting it for the record. By the end of the day, The investigation summary was completed, 3 pages long, attached with a witness list and a copy of Michael Rosewood's statement. In the preliminary conclusion section, he wrote, "Husband's and witnesses' statements consistent, no abnormal behavior. No signs of struggle or dispute. No witnesses heard strange noises on the night of the incident." The report was forwarded to superiors for review, and per protocol, the case retained its classification as adult missing person, family factors. Delgado's final internal note that day was brief. No clear criminal elements, but scene requires continued monitoring. 1 week after completing the witness interviews, the Janet Rosewood disappearance case temporarily quieted down. The press no longer mentioned it, and within the Los Angeles Police Department, the case was considered lacking clear criminal grounds. However, during cleanup of the industrial waste area behind the mortuary, a city sanitation service garbage collector discovered a strange object in the Rosewood mortuary's dedicated bin. It was a pale-colored fabric piece, shaped like a torn sleeve or shirt tail, with a dark stain in one corner. The smell of formalin was prominent, stronger than typical from medical waste. The worker deemed it unusual and reported it to the area supervisor, after which the information was passed to the Glendale Police Department, then forwarded to Detective Frank Delgado's unit. That same afternoon, Delgado arrived at the scene to recover the evidence. The industrial dumpster was in a shared disposal area for 3 facilities, with Rosewood Mortuary being the only one using embalming chemicals. He requested a halt to collection to inspect the remaining waste, but found no similar items. The fabric piece was removed with metal tongs, placed in a sealed bag, assigned a temporary code, and labeled with location, date, and time of discovery. Once back at the LAPD forensic lab, the sample underwent preliminary examination. Initial results identified the fabric as cotton blend, original color likely white or cream, with multiple brown stains on the surface and a mild positive reaction to formalin. However, 1963 forensic biology technology was insufficient to determine protein or cellular origin. Technicians could only confirm the sample had contact with embalming solution and had been damp. No clear blood traces under UV light, though one edge was singed, suggesting possible exposure to heat or concentrated chemicals. Delgado requested photographs from multiple angles and noted possibly related to chemical handling at the mortuary, but retain as reserve evidence. He also proposed expanding checks of the waste area for similar materials. The forensic report was sent to command, but the response was insufficient legal basis to expand. In an internal meeting minutes, the item was deemed peripheral, not proving a link to the missing person. Superiors directed halting active investigation, continuing external monitoring, and reopening if new evidence emerged. Delgado opposed this internally, filing a separate memo with the comment, "Sample has specific chemical origin, cannot be ordinary waste. Preserve for analysis when technology allows." However, the proposal was denied. He was instructed to transfer the sample to the department's evidence management, stored per regulations. On August 26, 1963, the fabric was moved to the Central LAPD Evidence Vault, coded #63, RWM, A1, with attached description. Cotton blend fabric, formalin-stained, undetermined biological source, related to Janet Rosewood, missing. At that time, the vault lacked long-term storage for organic samples, but Delgado requested separate sealing and noted store dry, away from light. He signed the transfer and kept a copy of the minutes. After procedures, superiors officially announced, temporarily closed Janet Rosewood investigation file due to no new evidence and lack of criminal elements. The decision was entered into the case log that day. Delgado left headquarters late, carrying copies of the report and evidence photos in his personal file. In his investigation notebook, he wrote one short line, "The only real thing at the scene is the formalin smell." After superiors decided to suspend the investigation, Detective Frank Delgado continued reviewing the Rosewood mortuary employee list in hopes of finding valuable information. In the personnel files, He noted a name frequently mentioned in administrative minutes, Angela Fong, the facility's office secretary, who worked directly with Michael Rosewood. She had been hired nearly a year before the disappearance and handled customer contacts, bookkeeping, and funeral scheduling. Delgado realized she was present at the facility the afternoon Janet vanished, but had not been formally interviewed. He arranged a meeting with Angela at a small cafe 3 blocks from the mortuary area. Angela was just over 20, petite, and spoke cautiously. She appeared cooperative, but somewhat anxious when asked about the Rosewoods' relationship. According to her, Janet had been more tired and worried lately, rarely appearing in the office area, sometimes saying the mortuary work exhausted her. Angela said she had heard Janet mention wanting to leave this place for a while, a few times, but without specifics on where. Regarding the night of the disappearance, Angela confirmed she left the office after 8 p.m. per Michael's early dismissal and did not return. She heard nothing unusual or any news of Janet afterward. Delgado observed her responses, noting hesitant demeanor and avoiding eye contact when mentioning Michael. In the interview minutes, he noted speech interrupted, signs of reluctance when asked about work relations. Shifting to more detailed questions, Angela admitted she and Michael met frequently outside work hours for job discussions. However, when asked about the meeting's content, she said only administrative matters and provided no further details. Delgado found no concrete evidence their relationship exceeded professional bounds, but noted irregularity in contact frequency. Michael often called Angela in the evenings, even on non-funeral days. When asked why, Angela explained Michael liked discussing work late, and she saw nothing strange. The interview ended after nearly an hour, yielding no new data. All Delgado gained was descriptions of Janet's mental state before disappearing. She became quieter, more emotional, and often complained of fatigue. Regarding Angela, she confirmed the Rosewoods' relationship was still normal, though Janet sometimes seemed distant from her husband. No evidence indicated serious conflict or violence. After the meeting, Delgado reported to superiors. The summary minutes stated, secondary witness, Angela Fong. Mortuary secretary, close relationship with owner. Provided no verifiable information related to disappearance. No signs of concealment or criminal violation. However, in his private note, Delgado wrote, witness showed stress, tendency to protect Michael Rosewood, note if case reopens. In the following 2 weeks, the police conducted no further investigation, only maintaining contact with the Rosewood family for updates. Michael continued working normally, attending funerals, showing no abnormal signs. As for Angela, she came to the office daily, but per other employees, avoided mentioning Delgado or police checks. By month's end, she submitted a resignation for moving closer to family. Michael Rosewood approved it the same day. 3 days later, Angela left Los Angeles. Her new address in personnel files was a riverside suburb, nearly 100 kilometers away. Delgado learned of it via a late administrative report, after she had gone. He added to his investigation notebook, witness left city, no contact number. The Janet Rosewood disappearance officially entered a quiet phase. In the month's final summary report, Delgado concluded, no direct evidence proving crime, witnesses' evidence and scene insufficient for expanded investigation. However, he requested retaining all original files, plus his supplemental notes at the office, in case of future developments. By late September 1963, over a month since Janet Rosewood was reported missing, the investigation had virtually stalled. All collected data stopped at observation and preliminary interviews, with no physical evidence or statements indicating criminal activity. Efforts to trace leads outside the scene yielded nothing. Related agencies like hospitals, bus stations, and motels within the city confirmed no records matching Janet's description. In the final periodic review meeting of the year, the LAPD investigation room issued the official conclusion, no criminal elements. The 13-page summary report generally assessed the victim may have left voluntarily due to personal pressure or private reasons, not excluding accidental incident, but no basis for criminal involvement. The file was reclassified under missing unknown cause and shifted to archive status. The closure decision was signed on December 12, 1963, marking the end of all active investigation. Samples and scene photos were stored at the Central Evidence Vault, while administrative documents moved to regional file storage. Detective Frank Delgado, the lead, disagreed with the conclusion but had to comply. In an internal memo to superiors, he stated no criminal evidence, but many details unexplained. Darkroom scene has abnormalities, and key witness left city post-event. However, his opinion received no response. In the era's management system, undetermined missing persons cases often shifted to passive after 60 days, without developments. Delgado quietly kept copies of all original files, including scene photos, interview minutes, and technical summaries. He bound a personal file marked JR in his office cabinet. He also duplicated some scene film images for personal retention, in case official files were destroyed after storage expiration. In his 1963 investigation notebook, the final line was brief. Case ends without an ending. Afterward, everything gradually settled. Rosewood Mortuary continued normal operations, unaffected by the disappearance. Michael Rosewood attended funerals regularly, seen by the local community as calm and reliable. His wife's vanishing was only sporadically mentioned in neighbor talks, then faded. No press followed up, and the case file sank among thousands of other city missings. Delgado was reassigned to other cases the following year, but occasionally reviewed the Janet Rosewood file at shift's end. He once submitted a request to re-examine the mortuary area sample with new technology, but was denied due to closure. From 1964 onward, Rosewood family information became scarce. The mortuary kept its sign, but Michael rarely mentioned Janet, occasionally placing flowers at Glendale Community Church. Some old employees left, new ones hired. By 1965, the facility renovated exteriors, expanded parking, and remodeled the basement. No one mentioned the old disappearance. In department administrative minutes, the final update for Janet Rosewood missing code was early 1966. Status: no further action. 6 years later, in 1969, the Los Angeles Times ran a small marriage notice. Michael Rosewood marries Angela Fong, private ceremony in Pasadena. The news reached Delgado via an old colleague. Upon reading, he added 2 lines to his investigation notebook. Rosewood remarries. She is still missing. No one in the force then noticed the detail, as the file was in inactive category. The minutes, film photos, and Delgado's notes lay silent in a personal drawer. In the shadows of a case the city had completely forgotten. In March 2005, the Rosewood Mortuary Funeral Home, once a long-established facility in Glendale, was sold to a real estate investment company. After more than 4 decades of operation, the building had fallen into serious disrepair and was slated for demolition to make way for a new shopping center. Demolition work began early in the month, carried out by a local contracting crew. Most of the above-ground structure was removed in the first few days, leaving only the basement and the dark room deep underground to be dismantled last. On the afternoon of March 18th, as 2 workers used hammers and pneumatic chisels to break through the back wall of the dark room, they noticed a section of concrete wall that was a lighter gray color, distinctly different from the rest. The surface of this layer was smoother, thicker, and did not seamlessly connect with the older wall. When tapped, it produced a solid non-hollow echo, unlike the adjacent areas. Thinking it was a patch from later repairs, they continued chiseling outward until the chisel blade struck a hard metal object. After enlarging the opening, they discovered a cavity about 30 centimeters deep inside the wall, containing an old, dusty tin box. The box was heavily rusted, with the lid nearly fused shut. When pried open, it contained a few small items: a slender silver bracelet engraved with 2J, always M, a stained handkerchief, and a roll of undeveloped Kodak film wrapped in foil. The workers did not touch the artifacts further, and immediately reported it to the site supervisor. The supervisor noted that the engraving on the bracelet could be an identifying detail and decided to halt demolition, contacting the Glendale police to hand over the items. Local patrol units arrived at the scene that evening, prepared a temporary report, documented the objects, the discovery location, and the condition of the surrounding wall. Upon reviewing the building's archived records, they realized that Rosewood Mortuary had been linked to an unsolved missing person case from 1963. Due to the nature of the discovery within a building with special legal implications, the report was urgently forwarded to the Los Angeles Police Department, the unit managing the original case files. In the handover report, local officers clearly stated, objects found at the scene matched the location mentioned in the Janet Rosewood case, missing in 1963. The tin box and its contents were sealed, assigned new evidence codes, and transferred to the LAPD evidence vault the same day. The discovery was not publicized, as the area remained part of an active construction site with no confirmed criminal elements. However, in the LAPD records storage room, the name Rosewood Mortuary immediately evoked an old, long-closed file. The Janet Rosewood missing person case was listed under missing unknown cause from 1963 and had never been reopened. Under new regulations applied since the early 2000s, cases with new evidence or suspected criminal links could be transferred to the Cold Case Investigation Unit. On March 21st, the Glendale report was officially forwarded to this unit. In the intake list, the Janet Rosewood, missing, 1963 case was marked with Priority Level 2 for the reason discovery of evidence potentially identifying the victim. The old file was retrieved from storage, where it sat among thousands of the city's unsolved cases. The thin file, with a faded cover, included scene reports, black and white photographs, and a few handwritten notes by investigator Frank Delgado. Upon transfer to the cold case room, administrative notes recorded that the Rosewood file had never been re-examined since closure, and all original evidence remained in the main vault under Code 63, RWM. A1. The match between the code and the new discovery site drew special attention from the investigation team. The cold case unit's preliminary report described discovery of an old tin box in the wall structure of the Rosewood Mortuary facility containing personal items matching the description of victim Janet Rosewood. Modern forensic examination required to determine origin. In an internal unit meeting the following week, the lead analyst recommended officially reopening the file, as the new discovery could alter the case's nature. On March 25, 2005, the approval document for reinvestigation was signed. The Janet Rosewood, missing, 1963 case was officially moved to open case status in the LAPD cold case catalog, marking the first time in 42 years that Janet Rosewood's name returned to the Los Angeles Police Department's active investigation system. Immediately after the Janet Rosewood, missing, 1963 file was transferred to reopened cold case status, the Los Angeles Police Department's cold case unit assigned Detective Nora Raines to lead the investigation. Raines was an investigator specializing in historical forensic examination, having participated in numerous old cases reinvestigated using retrospective DNA technology. Upon taking over the case, she was handed the entire restored original file from storage, a thin set of documents clipped in an old paper folder, corners worn and showing signs of dampness. The contents included scene reports prepared by Detective Frank Delgado in 1963, witness interview statements, black and white photos of the basement area, and an inventory of sealed evidence under codes #63, RWM, A1 and #63, RWM, A2. Administrative notes stated, samples not examined due to technological limitations at the time of storage. Raines carefully read every page, marking sections that could be cross-referenced with current evidence. The 1963 scene report clearly described a differently colored paint patch, skid marks on the cement floor, hair fibers, and fabric pieces with traces of formalin, perfectly matching the location where the tin box was found in 2005. She created a preliminary summary table, dividing data into two groups: old physical evidence and new physical evidence. Both groups directly related to the basement and dark room of the Rosewood Mortuary Funeral Home. The old samples were extracted from the central evidence vault after nearly 4 decades of sealing. Though the containers showed slight oxidation and faded labels, the evidence condition was sufficient for retrospective DNA testing. Raines prepared a request form for the LAPD Forensics Technical Room to conduct new method DNA analysis, including a detailed explanation for reopening the samples. The file was approved within 3 days. The hair fiber and fabric samples were transferred to the department's laboratory. Technicians used enzyme-based DNA extraction and gene chain amplification to search for mitochondrial DNA, a method commonly applied to old or degraded samples. Simultaneously, Raines requested chemical trace analysis on the fabric to identify the type of formalin used. Preliminary results were expected within 3 weeks. While waiting, she focused on reviewing information related to the Rosewood Mortuary's facilities during its operational period. The 1963 construction records were stored at Glendale's Urban Management Office, including original blueprints, repair permits, and material acceptance receipts. There, Raines discovered a notable detail in the repair records dated August 19, 1963. Just 2 days after Janet was reported missing, there was an invoice for 42 bags of industrial Portland cement, a quantity far exceeding normal maintenance needs for a small funeral home. The purchaser was listed as M. Rosewood, signed by hand with the facility's address. The invoice was confirmed paid in cash. When cross-referencing with a copy of Delgado's 1963 scene report, Raines noted that he had described a newly bright-colored wall section in the dark room, exactly at the spot where workers found the tin box 42 years later. She immediately added this detail to the evidence comparison table. Continuing to check the mortuary's tax records and business licenses, Raines found that between August and December 1963, the facility temporarily ceased operations twice, citing equipment repairs. These closure notices aligned with the repair timelines in the construction permits. This was the first data point suggesting possible structural intervention in the building immediately after the disappearance. To strengthen the file, Raines requested retrieval of local newspaper clippings from 1963 to 1965. In the August 21, 1963 edition of the Los Angeles Herald-Examiner, she found a small 4-line notice: wife of Glendale funeral homeowner, Mrs. Janet Rosewood, reported missing since last weekend. Police state no criminal elements discovered. This news matched the timeline in the file exactly. After nearly 2 weeks of review, Raines' compiled file had sufficient initial grounds. The new evidence location matched the 1963 anomaly area. Cement materials were purchased at the exact time of the victim's disappearance. And the key witness, Angela Fong, had left Los Angeles shortly after the incident. The progress report submitted to Cold Case Unit leadership concluded: wall structure newly built during the disappearance period, potentially concealing evidence. Samples seized in 1963 remain viable for modern DNA analysis. Raines also recommended retrieving copies of Frank Delgado's personnel file to examine any private notes he kept before retirement. Storage confirmed Delgado had submitted an unofficial report in 1964, but it had never been entered into the electronic system. She requested a copy for review. While awaiting DNA test results, Raines compiled additional administrative documents: Michael Rosewood's professional license, business registration, and construction material purchase records. All were reorganized into a new electronic file, coded as Cold Case 4527, Rosewood. At the time of completing the interim report, she noted in the conclusion, data uncovered from old records indicates possible concealment or alteration of the funeral home structure after Janet Rosewood's disappearance. Remaining evidence in storage, especially hair fibers and fabric pieces, requires retrospective DNA examination to establish victim linkage. Continue comparing examination results with the CODIS database upon availability. Detective Nora Raines' report was submitted on April 12, 2005, officially marking the full reactivation of the Janet Rosewood case after 42 years of being forgotten. 3 weeks after submitting the samples for examination, Detective Nora Raines received notification from the LAPD Forensics Technical Room. The retrospective DNA analysis results for the samples seized in 1963 were complete. The official report was 12 pages long, accompanied by a data table detailing the extraction and gene sequence comparison process. The hair fiber sample, after processing via mitochondrial DNA extraction, showed a gene sequence matching DNA obtained from a maternal relative of Janet Rosewood, specifically her niece on her mother's side, currently living in Pasadena. The match achieved 99.7% reliability, sufficient to determine that the sample collected from the Rosewood mortuary darkroom in 1963 belonged to Janet. The fabric piece submitted with the hair sample was also reanalyzed. Using modern hemoglobin trace detection techniques, examiners identified extremely small amounts of blood absorbed into the fabric fibers. Although insufficient for full nuclear gene sequence analysis, the mitochondrial DNA extracted from this blood sample also matched Janet's niece's DNA sequence completely. This confirmed that the fabric had been stained with the victim's blood. The report also pointed out another detail. In addition to Janet's DNA sequence, the fabric sample contained a second DNA trace, male blood type O, identity undetermined. This gene sequence did not match any DNA profiles in the National Criminal Database at that time. Raines marked this detail in her private notes, viewing it as open evidence for the next investigation phase. In addition to the biological samples, she also requested the laboratory to examine the evidence discovered in the tin box, particularly the undeveloped Kodak film roll. Although the film was heavily discolored due to age, the LAPD imaging team, in coordination with experts from the Los Angeles Forensic Photography Institute, performed restoration using a slow chemical process. They processed each frame in a darkroom using blue light and polarizing filters to minimize damage. After 3 days, the restoration yielded 6 clear frames and 2 partially damaged ones. All were digitized and enlarged for analysis. In the first 5 frames, the images captured the dark room in the Rosewood mortuary basement, chemical trays, a print washer, and the characteristic black curtain. One of the photos showed Janet Rosewood standing next to the workbench, wearing a light-colored shirt and a dark apron. Her face was half-lit, half-shadowed by the red safe light. In the reflection on the metal surface of the print washer, experts noticed the faint silhouette of a man standing behind her, with clear shoulders and elbows. When enlarged, the frame revealed the man wearing a white shirt, his left hand extended forward as if holding something, possibly a camera or a small object. The laboratory determined the film was Kodak Tri-X 400 type, produced in the early 1960s, commonly used for indoor photography with high light sensitivity. The exposure and contrast levels in the frames allowed technicians to relatively determine the shooting time at night under the darkroom's sole red light conditions. Spectroscopic analysis based on light direction and shadows indicated the images were taken during a time frame matching the night Janet was reported missing. The expert team noted in the report, exposure parameters, color temperature and light reflection positions are consistent with darkroom conditions used between 20 o'clock and 24:00 hours, August 1963. The 6 frames were resealed, backed up digitally, and sent to Nora Raines, along with the examination report. When cross-referencing the photos with the old scene diagram, she noted the shooting angle matched the area behind the print washer wall, where workers discovered the tin box in 2005. The Forensics Technical Room's summary report also clearly stated high probability that the film roll was shot at the exact scene where the new evidence was found. Raines organized all data into a comparison table. The first line read, hair sample, DNA matches Janet Rosewood relative. The second line, fabric piece, contains Janet's blood plus undetermined male ODNA. The third line, film photos, images of victim in darkroom at corresponding scene location. The final line in her notes section simply read, time overlap. The forensic results from two evidence sources 40 years apart, matching in location and time, demonstrated high connectivity between the 1963 scene and the 2005 discovery. In the report submitted to Cold Case Unit leadership, Raines concluded, biological samples prove the victim's presence in the Rosewood mortuary basement during the time proximate to the disappearance. The second male DNA trace opens a new investigation direction. The Kodak film is direct visual evidence showing the victim in the dark room immediately before vanishing. The report was approved for addition to Cold Case 4527, Rosewood, and moved to the phase of identity evaluation comparison in the California State DNA database. Immediately after the forensic examination results were confirmed, Detective Nora Raines submitted a request to retrieve the male O blood type DNA sequence found on the fabric and cross-reference it with the National CODIS database. This system had been expanded since the late 1990s, storing genetic profiles of millions of individuals, including medical industry employees, military personnel, and those who had submitted samples at citizen testing facilities. After nearly 2 weeks of processing, the forensics technical room reported a partial gene sequence match. The male DNA sequence discovered in the 1963 sample matched the profile of an individual named Michael Rosewood, born 1929, residing in Glendale, California. His DNA profile was in the database due to participation in a city business association health screening program in the late 1990s, when California began storing genetic records for medical identification purposes. The report confirmed a 99.98% match for the previously unidentified male DNA from the evidence. Raines immediately requested identity verification. Tax records showed Michael Rosewood was still alive, now 76 years old, co-owner of a small funeral home in suburban Glendale. He had married Angela Fong in 1969 and had 2 adult children. Financial data indicated Rosewood maintained stable status, no criminal record, no prior offenses, respected in the community, and regularly contributed to local social activities and church funds. However, Raines noted in the file, DNA matches sample collected at 1963 disappearance scene requires independent verification. Per modern investigation protocol, to strengthen evidence, police must obtain a second comparison sample from an independent source of the suspect. Without an arrest warrant, Raines decided to apply passive surveillance measures. A team of investigators was assigned to monitor Michael Rosewood for 2 consecutive weeks, recording daily routines, residence, and frequent locations. Notes showed he lived with his wife in a quiet 1-story home near the old residential area, occasionally visited the funeral home in the mornings, and spent the rest of his time reading and gardening. No unusual behavior was observed in his current activities. To obtain a comparative biological sample, the investigation team conducted household waste collection under permitted regulations. On the night of June 8, they retrieved a trash bag from the bin in front of the house, containing a used paper coffee cup, toothbrush, and tissues. All items were sealed, separately coded, and transferred to the LAPD DNA examination room. Analysis results confirmed the gene sequence from the trash samples matched completely with the male O DNA discovered on the 1963 blood-stained fabric. The compatibility level reached 100% across 16 tested genetic loci, completely ruling out random coincidence. The supplementary examination report affirmed DNA sample from evidence and DNA sample from Michael Rosewood's personal biological items originate from the same genetic source. Upon receiving the results, Raines immediately updated the investigation file. She compiled all comparative data, evidence location, disappearance timeline, victim and suspect DNA sequences, film photos capturing Janet in the dark room, and construction documents showing cement purchase immediately after the incident. All factors converged on a single point: the Rosewood mortuary basement, August 1963. In the internal report submitted to Cold Case Unit leadership, she presented briefly, DNA testing has clearly identified the man present at the Janet Rosewood disappearance scene as Michael Rosewood, no possibility of genetic error. Recommend transferring the file to suspect investigation phase. The report was approved the same day. Subsequently, the investigation team began collecting administrative documents related to Michael Rosewood to serve the re-interrogation process. Civil records confirmed he still owned the majority stake in Rosewood Mortuary, although the original facility had been demolished. Additionally, old 1963 financial documents stored at the local bank showed transactions for construction materials matching the time Delgado had noted the new wall section in the dark room. All this data was updated by Raines into the evidence table. In the final note of the Phase 1 summary, she wrote, "Male DNA collected from the scene matches Michael Rosewood. Absolutely. Administrative and physical factors confirm the suspect is alive, residing in Glendale. Recommend continued surveillance, planning approach and interrogation after completing legal file." With this report, Michael Rosewood was officially listed as the primary suspect in the Janet Rosewood case, a disappearance spanning over 4 decades that for the first time had evidence identifying the man present at the incident location. After Michael Rosewood was identified as the official suspect, Detective Nora Raines focused on strengthening witness evidence to support the forensic proofs. The first step was to track down the list of individuals who had worked at Rosewood Mortuary during the 1960-1965 period, compiled from tax records and old employment contracts stored at the Glendale Business Bureau. The records listed 8 people, 3 of whom were still alive and residing in California. Raines contacted each directly for retrospective investigation interviews, focusing on structural changes to the building and internal operations of the facility in the period following Janet Rosewood's disappearance. The first witness was Harold Mendez, 71 years old, formerly an embalming assistant at the funeral home in the early 1960s. He now lived in Santa Clarita and agreed to meet Raines at his residence. When asked about the time of the incident, Mendez said he clearly remembered the day Janet vanished because the place was unusually quiet. According to him, just a few days after Janet stopped appearing, Michael Rosewood announced to all staff that the facility would close for 2 days for technical maintenance of the chemical processing system. He confirmed this was the first time during his employment there that the funeral home fully closed on a weekday. When Raines asked if anyone was allowed into the basement area during maintenance, Mendez replied that all employees were required to take leave and not return until notified. Upon returning to work, he noticed minor changes. The wall behind the dark room had a different, brighter paint color. The smell of fresh cement was still evident in the air. He recounted, "I asked him if he was repairing the plumbing system. He just said just patching a leak and changed the subject." Raines recorded the entire statement, marking it as the first data point confirming basement repairs immediately after the disappearance. The second witness, Ellen Park, formerly an administrative secretary at Rosewood Mortuary, now lived in Ventura County. She recalled that in the week Janet vanished, Michael Rosewood called her to say she didn't need to come to work for a few days because they were decontaminating the work area. She said, upon returning, she saw the basement staircase had been repainted and the metal door had new hinges. Ellen confirmed she had never seen any repairs done before and received no maintenance invoices, which she handled in bookkeeping. According to her, he controlled every financial detail, but that time there were no documents at all. She also remembered a small truck delivering materials to the funeral home during the closure period, but was unsure of the cargo type. When shown images from the 1963 records, she confirmed the bright-colored wall section was a new detail appearing after the maintenance. Raines audio recorded the entire interview and prepared a signed witness statement. The third witness, Thomas Riley, then an hourly groundskeeper, now lived in Riverside. He said in the days after Janet's disappearance, he was called to clean the backyard and collect waste per Michael's instructions. Among the trash were empty cement bags and a few empty paint cans, but when asked, Rosewood said they were just clearing the storage room. Riley confirmed that in his many years working there, he had never seen the owner personally repair walls or use heavy construction materials. When asked if anyone else was involved in that work, he said he only saw Rosewood working in the basement with an unfamiliar builder for 2 days. after which the builder never returned. All three statements were cross-referenced and entered into the official file. Raines created a witness evidence summary table, clearly stating, 1 Rosewood Mortuary closed for 2 days, citing technical maintenance immediately after Janet's disappearance. 2 independent witnesses confirmed basement wall repairs, different paint color, fresh cement smell. 3 A materials delivery truck was observed at the facility during that time. 4 No administrative documents for maintenance costs. The report concluded, clear structural changes occurred in the Rosewood Mortuary basement area during the time frame, matching the victim's disappearance. This is confirmed by multiple witnesses indicating possible intentional concealment or repair. All statements were typed, attached with witness signatures, and the handling investigator's certification. Audio recordings were backed up in the LAPD data system and hard copies stored in cold case 4527, Rosewood. Finally, Raines completed a report requesting superiors to authorize expanded scene investigation. The recommendation section stated, the independent statements, combined with existing forensic evidence, provide sufficient grounds to request a search warrant for the remaining Rosewood Mortuary area, including the basement and the concrete wall structure discovered during demolition. The report was submitted on July 20, 2005, with all witness notes attached, becoming a critical supplement in the formal search warrant application for the old funeral home. After completing the old witness interviews and collecting matching data on the basement wall repairs, Detective Nora Raines decided to locate the original 1963 case holder, Frank Delgado, the lead LAPD investigator at the time. Per administrative records, Delgado retired in 1984 and now resided at a Santa Clarita nursing home, about 40 miles north of Los Angeles. He was now over 80, in poor health, but with a sharp memory. The meeting was arranged through the facility's administration on a morning in early August 2005. When Raines introduced herself and the reason for the visit, Delgado immediately recognized the case name. He said slowly, Janet Rosewood, the Glendale funeral home. I remember that case well. The conversation began in a small sunlit room, with old case files neatly placed on the table. Delgado said the disappearance had haunted him for years because he felt something was wrong, but lacked tools to prove it. He clearly remembered the formalin smell in the basement and the bright-colored wall behind the print washer, a detail he had noted in his personal notebook but was removed from the official report by superiors as irrelevant. Raines showed him newly restored scene photos from storage, including one of that wall section. Delgado stared for a long time and said, yes, that spot. I requested further checks but was denied. We didn't have an expanded search warrant, and I was ordered to close the file. His voice was hoarse, mixed with frustration, as if old memories had just been unearthed after decades. When Raines asked if he kept any case documents, Delgado nodded. He said after the file was closed, he kept a copy of his personal notebook and a few privately taken photos before handing everything over to the department. I know I shouldn't have, he admitted, but I felt I hadn't finished the job. He slowly stood, opened a small bedside drawer, and pulled out a faded leather-bound notebook, along with an envelope containing 4 black and white photos. The notebook was meticulously handwritten, dates, times, shot locations, and brief observation. One page was specially marked with a red X, notes about the dark room wall, solid sound, new paint layer, possibly covering something. Delgado also wrote in the margin, not allowed to drill, keep photos as private evidence. Raines flipped through the accompanying photos. One captured the dark room wall at the exact angle where workers found the tin box in 2005. Taken from a low angle, it clearly showed the boundary between old and new paint layers. The others documented the basement staircase, chemical tray positions, and a cement floor corner with skid marks. She recognized many details matching current digital images, differing only in time-faded colors. Delgado explained he had intended to request a second search warrant, but was not approved because leadership at the time said insufficient criminal evidence. He lowered his voice. "I always thought something was behind that wall. But back then, we had no DNA technology, no way to prove it." Raines reassured him that his work had laid the foundation for the current investigation. Delgado gave a faint smile. "It took 40 years for someone to go back there. Maybe now things will come to light." Before leaving the facility, he signed a handover statement for the notebook and 4 photos, authorizing LAPD to use all materials in the reinvestigation. He said slowly, "If you reopen this case, do it right. Don't let it get buried again." The notebook and photos were immediately transferred by Raines to headquarters, sealed in a new evidence envelope, coded per cold case system. Back at the office, she began cross-referencing the notebook information with current forensic files. Delgado's note about the wall sounding not hollow but solid perfectly matched the 2005 demolition crew's conclusion when workers noticed the wall's distinct structure. The entry, "new light gray paint layer," aligned with the original criminal report description and former employees' statements. The photos he provided were sent to the forensic imaging unit for comparison with modern digital images. Technical analysis results showed absolute structural matches in wall height, dimensions, and distance to the print washer. This precisely pinpointed the suspect area in the new scene diagram. Raines prepared a supplementary report, stating, "Materials provided by original investigator Frank Delgado are independent evidence confirming the existence of an anomalous wall section in the darkroom since 1963. Original images and notebook notes reinforce reasonable suspicion of structural intervention to conceal evidence." She attached all these materials to the main cold case 4527 Rosewood file as valid historical evidence. Subsequently, Raines finalized the legal proposal requesting a search warrant for the remaining Rosewood mortuary basement area. In the argument section, she stated, "Based on witness evidence, DNA examination results, new evidence discovery, and original investigator documents, there are reasonable grounds to suspect the darkroom area was structurally altered to conceal criminal traces. Request the Los Angeles County Court to issue an expanded search warrant." The legal file included DNA reports, witness statements, original and new scene photos, and Delgado's notebook, all submitted to the prosecutor's office on August 5, 2005. When signing the file, Nora Raines wrote the final line in her personal notebook, "Delgado was right. The darkroom wall was more than just a wall." The search warrant was approved by the Los Angeles County Court in mid-August 2005, authorizing the LAPD to excavate the remaining basement of Rosewood Mortuary, the area formerly the darkroom of the funeral home. On the morning of August 17, the LAPD forensics team, in coordination with the cold case unit and 2 structural engineers, began work. The scene area was completely sealed off, with only specially authorized personnel allowed entry. Nora Raines was present from early on, working with the technical forensic supervisor to create a detailed diagram before wall breaching. The suspect wall was on the west side of the dark room, where Delgado had noted in his notebook, and matched the location where workers discovered the tin box months earlier. The light gray paint layer covered evenly, but light tapping produced a heavier, more solid sound than the rest of the wall. A ground-penetrating radar scanner was brought in to examine internal structure. Reflected images on the screen showed an irregular cavity, approximately 30 to 40 centimeters deep, extending over 1.5 meters. At the cavity's center, the device displayed a distinct response area, possibly a metal-containing object or hard bone. Raines ordered pilot drilling to collect dust samples. A faint formalin smell escaped from the first drill hole, causing the entire team to pause momentarily. Technicians immediately set up exhaust fans and toxic masks before continuing. After 2 hours, the concrete wall began revealing its inner layer, a mixture of cement and sand binding with fabric scraps. When the first concrete layer was removed, a dark-colored fabric piece was found adhered to the material block, possibly part of clothing. Minutes later, the chisel tip struck an ivory-colored hard object. A technician recognized it as a human forearm bone segment. Work was immediately halted for video recording and scene photography. The remaining wall was removed in small sections until an approximately 80-centimeter deep cavity was fully open. Inside the cavity, beneath layers of cement dust and lime, additional bone parts appeared: skull, ribs, along with many fabric pieces still bearing chemicals. A faded floral dress fabric, with recognizable faint patterns, was wrapped around the leg bones. Nearby were metal buttons, white plastic buttons, and a few brown hairs still stuck to the lime layer. Under illumination, a distinct smell of formalin, mixed with decay, confirmed prior chemical preservation exposure. Forensic technicians recorded each position, photographed the entire wall cavity before sample collection. Each bone piece was numbered, placed in specialized bags, with coordinates noted within the wall structure. Fabric and hair samples were separated for DNA examination. At the cavity's bottom edge, the team discovered a faint fingerprint impression in the old mortar. Close-up photos were taken immediately. The print was low-positioned, possibly created during construction or cement covering. When processed with fluorescent powder, the fingerprint pattern emerged clearly, with full central whorl, sufficient for database comparison. After 6 continuous hours, the entire excavation was complete. Over 30 bone fragments were collected, potentially assembling into a near-complete body frame, along with numerous auxiliary items. Samples were immediately transferred to the LAPD Forensic Examination Room under cold preservation. The chief examiner's preliminary report 2 days later confirmed the bone samples were human female, age at death approximately 30-35, matching Janet Rosewood's personal characteristics. Emergency mitochondrial DNA examination was conducted, cross-referenced with a stored sample from the victim's niece. The DNA sequence matched 100%, with 99.999% reliability. This confirmed the skeleton found in the wall was Janet Rosewood, missing since August 1963. In the report to the cold case unit, the examiner added, "Bone samples show trauma marks in the skull and neck areas. Left skull has a longitudinal crack, formed by strong blunt force impact. Neck area shows slight vertebral wear, consistent with pulling or strangulation force." Additionally, the recovered dress fabric tested positive for formalin, confirming the body had direct contact with embalming solution. Inexplicable if the victim died naturally. The fingerprint discovered in the mortar was analyzed and compared with LAPD archived records. Results matched Michael Rosewood's fingerprints, taken from his 1959 professional license application. The criminal technical report concluded, fingerprint in the mortar layer may have been created during the covering wall construction process. These details were compiled in the complete forensic report, 28 pages, signed August 21, 2005. The conclusion line stated, Janet Rosewood's body was concealed within the dark room wall structure in the Rosewood mortuary basement. Based on decomposition state, material layers, and histological characteristics, the concealment timeframe is determined to be late August 1963. The same day, evidence including bones, fabric, and mortar samples was transferred to the Central Evidence Vault, stored under Cold Case 4527. Rosewood Exhibit G1, G12. As the old dark room door was resealed after the search, Nora Raines stood looking at the empty wall, where 42 years earlier it had been carefully sealed. In her notebook, she wrote a brief line, "No more doubt." Delgado was right. Janet never left that house. 3 days after the official forensic conclusion, the Los Angeles Police Department sent an invitation to Michael Rosewood to come to the cold case unit headquarters for questioning. The interrogation session was held on the morning of August 24, 2005, with Detective Nora Raines and a legal representative from the department present. Rosewood, then 76 years old, thin, with silver hair, wearing a dark suit, arrived with his personal attorney. He appeared on time, calm, showing no signs of stress. Raines briefly reintroduced the reason for the session, reinvestigating the 1963 disappearance of his wife Janet Rosewood, and stated that the department had just completed new examination results. When asked, Rosewood maintained the same statement as 40 years earlier. He insisted Janet had left the house that night, possibly due to work pressure or personal matters. "I've said everything I could say since 1963, he replied, voice slow. "I don't know what happened to her." Raines asked him to describe in detail the last night he saw Janet. He recounted nearly identically to the old file. "She went down to the dark room. He worked upstairs, then went to sleep. The next morning she was gone." All answers were monotone, almost memorized. When Raines asked about the funeral home, closing for 2 days after the disappearance, Rosewood said it was just a routine technical shutdown for equipment maintenance. He denied any major basement repairs. Raines did not react, only silently took notes before opening the photo file. She placed on the table a photo of the demolished darkroom wall, revealing the cement cavity and discovered bones. Rosewood looked for a moment, then turned away, eyes avoiding the image. "Can you explain why Janet's bones were found in the wall of your funeral home's darkroom?" Raines asked. He was silent for a few seconds, then replied, "I don't know. I didn't do that." The answer was so calm, it was hard to tell if it was genuine or false. Raines continued presenting the evidence. DNA examination results confirming hair, blood, and bone samples all belonged to Janet. Male DNA on the blood-stained fabric matched Michael Rosewood absolutely. His fingerprint left in the wall mortar, and the cement purchase invoice dated 2 days after Janet's disappearance. Upon hearing the DNA detail, Rosewood glanced up briefly, then lowered his head. His attorney requested a pause to review documents, but Raines only said, "You have the right to remain silent. But all data has been scientifically confirmed, not based on speculation." The atmosphere in the room grew heavy. After a long silence, Rosewood said softly, "I lived my whole life believing the past could stay asleep. I didn't think they still remembered." When Raines asked who they were, he no longer answered. The attorney immediately intervened, stating the client would say no more. The interrogation continued for another 30 minutes, with procedural questions, but Rosewood only repeated that he was innocent, that someone else might have harmed his wife and hidden the body in the wall. When asked why he didn't report the police about closing the funeral home for 2 days after the disappearance, he said, "It was my facility. I had the right to repair when needed." No statement was convincing against the chain of evidence Raines presented. At the end of the session, she showed him a copy of the cement purchase receipt, signed Emma Rosewood, dated August 19, 1963. Rosewood looked at the paper for a long time, eyes fixed on the signature line, then said quietly, "That's my signature." When asked if he remembered what that amount of material was used for, he only replied, "No, it's been too long." That answer closed the interrogation. Raines prepared a detailed report, noting suspect Michael Rosewood denies all involvement. Cannot explain the presence of the body and DNA at the scene. When confronted with specific evidence, suspect remained silent. The report was signed by the investigator, attorney, and recorder. After Rosewood left headquarters, Raines finalized the report to superiors and attached the entire evidence file, from DNA results, scene-collected evidence, to old witness statements and Frank Delgado's documents. The comprehensive report, over 70 pages, was forwarded to the Los Angeles County District Attorney's Office for criminal prosecution evaluation. In the conclusion, Raines wrote briefly, "Forensic and physical evidence determined suspect Michael Rosewood's direct involvement in concealing and burying victim Janet Rosewood's body in the Rosewood mortuary darkroom wall. Recommend charging first-degree murder." That same afternoon, the cold case unit officially handed over the entire file to the Los Angeles County District Attorney's Office. The Janet Rosewood case, after 42 years of being forgotten, had shifted from questionable cold case to criminal prosecution case. Immediately after receiving the file from the cold case unit, the Los Angeles County District Attorney's Office held an emergency meeting to review prosecuting Michael Rosewood. The meeting took place on the 3rd floor of the Central Prosecutor Building, chaired by District Attorney Linda Carver, with participation from forensic experts, criminal attorneys, and cold case investigators. The meeting's goal was to determine evidence strength and assess viable charges. The file transferred by Detective Nora Raines was over 70 pages thick, including DNA examination reports, scene photos, old witness statements, cement purchase receipts, restored film photos, and Frank Delgado's notebook, all considered specially valuable legal evidence. The forensics technical room report was read first. Janet Rosewood's blood, hair, and bone DNA sequences matched family reference samples. Male DNA on the fabric matched Michael Rosewood absolutely. His fingerprint was found in the mortar at the body concealment site. These data, combined with forensic results determining time of death, matching the disappearance period, provided sufficient scientific basis for charges. Carver concluded, "This is no longer a missing person case, this is premeditated murder." Next was the legal circumstances analysis. The office's criminal advisor stated that under California law, first-degree murder has no statute of limitations, regardless of time elapsed. The body discovery and new DNA evidence restarted prosecution jurisdiction. Thus, Michael Rosewood's current age of 76 did not affect criminal prosecution viability. The formal recommendation was unanimously agreed: prosecute Michael Rosewood for first-degree murder under California Penal Code Section 187. The prosecution team began reorganizing all documents. They divided the file into 4 main evidence groups: physical, forensic, witness, and old investigation records. The physical group included scene photos, evidence collected from the wall, fabric samples, bones, fingerprint, and construction material purchase receipts. The forensic group included DNA examination results, bone examination reports, conclusions on time of death, and formalin chemical detected on evidence. The witness group compiled statements from 3 former employees confirming wall repairs, along with investigator Frank Delgado's statement and notebook notes. The old records group included all 1963 reports, photos, and report copies. Delgado's notebook was considered particularly important, as it proved suspicion about the darkroom wall existed from the start, but was overlooked due to legal limitations. This showed the suspect's concealment likely misled the 1963 investigation into misinterpreting the case nature, strengthening the premeditated element. Carver requested the forensic team to reconstruct the scene in a 3D model for courtroom presentation. Digitized images recreated the 1963 darkroom with precise positions of the wall, new paint section, print washer, and body discovery site. Technical experts also restored sound and lighting in the enclosed space to illustrate actual conditions during the incident. Meanwhile, the criminal attorney team drafted the official indictment, listing all charging elements. 1 victim died from violent impact and was concealed. 2 suspects' DNA and fingerprint present at the scene. 3 financial evidence confirming cement purchase at crime time frame. 4 suspect was the sole person with control over the incident area. 5 body concealment showed intent to destroy evidence. The indictment concluded, Michael Rosewood intentionally killed his wife, Janet Rosewood, and concealed the body in the Rosewood mortuary, darkroom wall in August 1963. This act constitutes first-degree murder. Raines, as lead investigator, was asked to prepare evidence presentation before the grand jury. She and the legal team reviewed every detail, ensuring all original documents were legally verified in origin, from 1963 sample collection to LAPD vault preservation. Each piece of evidence had storage codes, handover and receipt signatures to avoid validity disputes. Throughout the last 2 weeks of August, the prosecutor's office and cold case unit coordinated closely. Forensic experts were invited to explain DNA and bone examination technical details, preparing plain language presentations for court. A 40-page case overview summary was drafted specifically for the grand jury, describing events chronologically: 1963 disappearance, initial investigation efforts, file closure, 2005 discovery, DNA examination, suspect identification, and related physical evidence. The report also noted likely motive: marital tension, Michael Rosewood's close relationship with Angela Fong, and calculated concealment behavior. On September 1, 2005, the entire file was packaged into 5 large volumes, coded case number 2005, LEAC 4527, signed by Chief Prosecutor Linda Carver and Investigator Nora Raines. The file cover clearly stated, "The people of the state of California versus Michael Rosewood." Carver signed the official document transferring the file to the Los Angeles County Court, with requests for preliminary hearing and suspect detention pending trial. Before leaving the meeting room, she said to Raines, 42 years, and finally we have the answer. Your work gave that woman a voice." The file was handed to the court on the morning of September 3, 2005, marking the closure of the official prosecution preparation phase. The Janet Rosewood case, once a forgotten line in LAPD's thick archive, had now become one of the largest cold cases reopened in Los Angeles judicial history. The trial of the people of the state of California versus Michael Rosewood officially opened on January 10, 2006, at the Los Angeles County Court. The courthouse, located in downtown, attracted a large press crowd that morning, as this was one of the longest-running cold cases brought to trial in California history. Michael Rosewood, now 77 years old, appeared in a gray suit, accompanied by his defense attorney David Langford, who had defended many defendants in complex criminal cases. The prosecution was led by District Attorney Linda Carver, coordinating with investigator Nora Raines, responsible for presenting the technical evidence chain. The trial began with the reading of the indictment. The prosecution asserted Rosewood intentionally killed his wife Janet Rosewood in August 1963 and concealed the body in the Rosewood mortuary darkroom wall to hide the crime. Carver emphasized, modern science has done what the old era could not, given Janet Rosewood her own voice. In response, Attorney Langford argued the case relied on circumstantial evidence and faded memories, claiming the skeleton discovery was insufficient to prove murder because the body was not intact and cause of death could not be absolutely determined. He requested the court to dismiss the DNA samples due to a preservation chain over 40 years, with potential contamination risks. The court denied this request after hearing expert explanations. LAPD Chief Examiner Dr. Howard Chen detailed the 1963 sample storage process, continuously sealed and never violating preservation regulation. He described mitochondrial DNA recovery from bone and hair samples, proving the victim's gene sequence matched maternal relatives, absolutely. When the prosecution asked about the male O-DNA sequence, Chen confirmed a 100% match with Michael Rosewood, with statistical error nearly zero. Carver stated clearly, without him this gene sequence could not exist on the evidence. Next, the jury viewed scene images. On the large screen, 2005 darkroom images appeared. The broken wall, cement cavity containing bones, dress fabric, and fingerprint in the mortar. Nora Raines was called to the witness stand, presenting the entire investigation process from evidence discovery, old file retrieval, to forensic results. When the prosecution asked, "Do you doubt the body was placed there after 1963?" Raines replied firmly, "Impossible. The concrete layer and mortar composition match exactly the cement purchased at the victim's disappearance time." The defense attempted to counter by emphasizing the body was not intact, thus cause of death by violence could not be concluded. However, Dr. Michael Harner, California Forensic Institute bone examination expert, was called to confirm skull cracks and neck injuries cannot result from natural burial processes. These are signs of blunt force and strong compression. Injuries occurring while the victim was alive or immediately before death. The prosecution also projected images from the restored Kodak film. On the screen, the enlarged photo of Janet Rosewood standing in the dark room appeared, with a faint male silhouette behind her. When comparing height ratios and posture, the LAPD image analysis expert concluded the reflection matched Michael Rosewood's height and shoulder build from that period. Carver said in court, "Janet unintentionally left the only witness the very camera she was holding. Financial evidence was presented next. The receipt for 42 bags of cement, signed M. Rosewood, on August 19, 1963, was projected before the jury. The materials company accountant confirmed the signature matched the defendant's handwriting sample. The jury was shown a comparison table. The date Janet disappeared, the material purchase date, and witness reports of the funeral home closing for 2 days for technical maintenance. The timeline matched completely. Attorney Langford attempted to introduce an alternative possibility, suggesting someone else harmed Janet and hid the body. But the prosecution countered with the argument, Rosewood was the only person with access, management, and control over the basement area. There was no evidence of a third party's presence. Additionally, his fingerprint on the mortar proved he directly participated in building the wall. During the questioning phase, Rosewood was called to the witness stand at his attorney's request. He remained silent for most of the time, only saying, "I didn't kill my wife. I don't know why she ended up in that wall." When the prosecution presented the enlarged fingerprint photo, he looked at it for a moment, then lowered his eyes, offering no further response. The courtroom fell completely silent. The jury heard 2 more days of prosecution presentation, including the acoustic expert's report on wall hollowness and statements from old witnesses confirming wall repairs. All physical evidence, bones, dress fabric, fingerprint, DNA, film photos, material receipts, was accepted by the court as valid. The defense argument of lack of intact body was rejected because the bone evidence sufficiently identified the victim and death mechanism. In the final arguments, Prosecutor Carver said, 42 years ago, he used cement to seal away his crime. Today, those very cement particles have reopened the truth. Attorney Langford could only appeal for mercy, citing old age and the passage of time. The jury retired for deliberation on February 23, 2006, after 11 days of public trial. After just 5 hours of discussion, they returned to the courtroom with a unanimous decision. The court recorded physical forensic and witness evidence is sufficient to affirm the defendant's guilt. The court accepted all DNA evidence, images, forensic reports, and material receipts as official charging grounds. There was no longer doubt about the victim's identity or the defendant's intentional concealment. The trial concluded that day, paving the way for sentencing in early March. On the morning of March 3, 2006, Courtroom 7 of the Los Angeles County Court was packed when Judge Eleanor Walsh entered the bench. The atmosphere was thick with tension, as everyone understood today's session would close a case spanning over 4 decades. Michael Rosewood, 77 years old, sat silently in the defendant's row, hands clasped, eyes downcast. Beside him was attorney David Langford, looking weary after weeks of arguing. Before the session began, the judge requested all to rise, then announced, "The jury has completed deliberation and is ready to deliver the verdict." The foreperson, a middle-aged woman, stepped to the podium, holding a sealed envelope. When asked, she read aloud, "We, the jury in the case of the people of the state of California versus Michael Rosewood, after examining all evidence, witnesses, and arguments from both sides, unanimously find defendant Michael Rosewood guilty of first-degree murder under Section 187 of the California Penal Code." Murmurs filled the room. The prosecution remained silent, while Raines, seated in the witness row, only slightly bowed her head. Rosewood showed no reaction, his face stone-like. The judge requested the clerk to reread the verdict for the record. After confirmation, Judge Walsh allowed final statements before sentencing. Linda Carver, representing the prosecution, stood, voice firm. 42 years ago, a woman vanished without a trace. Today, we have heard the voice of truth, scientific evidence, witnesses, and justice. Janet Rosewood has been returned her name and existence. We request the maximum sentence under the law. Attorney Langford spoke briefly, emphasizing his client's advanced age and health, hoping the court would consider leniency. He said, "Mr. Rosewood has lived over half a century in honor, with no prior record, and now faces the past near the end of his life. But that defense did not change the outcome. Judge Walsh read the sentence slowly, her voice echoing evenly in the courtroom. The Los Angeles County Court, after reviewing all evidence and the jury's verdict, concludes that defendant Michael Rosewood intentionally killed his wife, Janet Rosewood, and concealed the body to hide the crime. This act demonstrates calculation, intent, and prolonged consequences. The court sentences the defendant to life imprisonment without parole. The courtroom fell silent. Rosewood looked around, eyes cloudy and tired, saying nothing. He was led out by two officers, steps slow without looking back. As the door closed, Carver gathered her files, while Raines stood still for a few minutes, gazing at the empty defendant's seat. After sentencing, the judge signed the order transferring the defendant to San Quentin State Prison for life-term inmates. Los Angeles press unanimously ran stories that afternoon. Front-page headlines emphasized 1963 cold case closed, justice after 4 decades. Articles described the case as proof of forensic science progress and persistent investigation efforts. Many papers featured Nora Raines's photo with the caption, "Investigator who gave the past a voice." In the official statement, the Los Angeles Police Department declared, with today's sentence, the Janet Rosewood missing person case, opened in 1963, is officially resolved. All related evidence and exhibits will be permanently stored in the cold case archive as part of the city's criminal investigation history. That same day, Raines submitted her final report to the cold case unit, summarizing the entire investigation process from the tin box discovery, old file restoration, retrospective DNA examination, to the trial and life sentence. She wrote in the conclusion, "Justice may be delayed, but it never disappears. Janet Rosewood has finally been found." That afternoon, leaving the court, Nora Raines stopped by the LAPD evidence vault. She requested reopening locker number 4527, containing Frank Delgado's old notebook. She placed a copy of the sentence beside it, then closed the locker. The day's last light shone on the handwritten label, Janet Rosewood, 1963, solved. Michael Rosewood's sentence is considered a milestone in California cold case trial history. It proves that a case buried in time can still be solved with persistence and technical advancement. With this sentencing, the Los Angeles police officially closed the Janet Rosewood case, a disappearance haunting Glendale for over 40 years, now recorded as one of the longest successfully resolved cases in state criminal records. After the trial concluded and the sentence was delivered, the Los Angeles County District Attorney's Office, in coordination with the LAPD, conducted a full review of the Janet Rosewood 1963 investigation process. An internal report over 100 pages long was prepared, not only to archive results, but also to document modern forensic methods that helped reconstruct a case once thought unsolvable. In the introduction, the cold case unit identified this as one of Los Angeles's longest-running cases, closed with absolute scientific evidence, without relying on confession or direct witnesses. The investigation process was divided into 4 main phases, spanning over a year from evidence discovery to court sentencing. The first phase began with the unexpected discovery during the 2005 demolition of Rosewood Mortuary. The tin box containing Janet Rosewood's personal items became the starting point for the entire reinvestigation chain. The cold case unit then retrieved the 1963 original file, restoring scene reports, investigator Frank Delgado's notebook, and samples sealed for 40 years. Restoring old evidence was the most critical step, requiring an evidence legalization process, proving the preservation chain was never interrupted. The LAPD Forensics Technical Room inspected seals, cross-referenced storage signatures, and confirmed all evidence remained legally valid. This was the foundation for the court to accept DNA samples during trial. The second phase focused on retrospective forensic examination. With mitochondrial DNA technology support, scientists successfully extracted gene sequences from Janet's hair and bone samples. This method allowed genetic tracing from degraded samples, identifying the victim with near absolute accuracy. More importantly, the technique also detected a second DNA sample, male, on the blood-stained fabric. This gene sequence was later matched in the CODIS database, resulting in a match with Michael Rosewood. Retrospective DNA evidence became the charging foundation, proving the suspect's presence at the scene during the victim's disappearance. The third phase included non-forensic supporting techniques. The investigation team used film and light analysis methods, a technology combining digital image processing and spectroscopy. The Kodak film roll found in the wall was developed and restored, producing images of Janet in the dark room. Analysis of shadows, exposure levels, and light reflection positions determined the shooting time matched the night she vanished. In the photo, the man's silhouette behind her was measured in ratio and compared to Michael Rosewood's height and build, creating indirect but valuable contextual evidence. This was the first time LAPD applied combined spectroscopy and old case image analysis, opening new applications for cold case investigation. Beyond forensic evidence, the team also implemented financial verification, often overlooked in old cases. By reviewing tax records, repair permits, and Rosewood mortuary accounting books, they discovered an industrial cement purchase transaction matching the victim's disappearance time. The receipt, signed by Michael Rosewood himself, became supplementary physical evidence to the DNA results. It proved the suspect repaired the basement wall immediately after Janet vanished, intentional concealment meeting first-degree murder elements. Another important part of the summary report was the old evidence legalization process, established by Nora Raines and the LAPD forensics team. This process ensured all 1960s samples were re-verified to current standards, cross-referencing handover records, confirming evidence vault managers, resealing all with new materials, and creating digital records alongside paper files. This not only protected evidence legality in court, but also became a model for future cold cases. The summary report also emphasized the human element, the pivotal roles of investigator Frank Delgado and Nora Raines. Delgado, though retired, kept his notebook and scene photos, later proving his suspicions correct. Raines, leveraging modern technology and interdisciplinary investigation, closed a 40-year gap, reconnecting the broken event chain. The combination of old and new investigation generations was evaluated as a symbol of the Los Angeles Police's enduring spirit in pursuing justice. The report concluded with technical statistics: 47 evidence items analyzed, 6 DNA samples extracted, 12 witnesses interviewed, 4 scientific methods applied. The aggregated results all led to one conclusion: Janet Rosewood died in the basement area, and the body was concealed immediately after by Michael Rosewood. On March 10, 2006, the case file was transferred to the LAPD Central Archive and officially entered into the Cold Case Solved Registry. In the notes section, bold text read, Janet Rosewood, missing 1963, solved 2006, confirmed by DNA and forensic reconstruction. A digital copy of the file was also stored in the National Database for Forensic Research and Training. The Cold Case Unit's final report concluded, the Janet Rosewood case is proof of the enduring value of physical evidence and the power of modern forensic science. Time may fade memories, but it cannot erase traces of truth. With the completion of the review process, the Los Angeles Police Department officially closed the investigation file, recording the Rosewood case as a new standard for 21st-century cold case investigations. The story of the Janet Rosewood case is not just a personal tragedy, but also reflects the profound value of justice, faith in science, and society's never-expiring responsibility in seeking truth in the United States. Over 40 years after a woman vanished in silence, the development of forensic technology, from retrospective DNA examination to spectroscopic image analysis, filled the gap time seemed to have erased. Details of Detective Nora Raines recovering investigator Frank Delgado's notebook and how seemingly minor evidence, like formalin-stained fabric, cement purchase receipt, or Kodak film roll, ultimately became the case-breaking foundation, remind us that in modern society, truth may be buried, but never disappears. In today's America, where technological speed and pace of life make it easy to forget foundational values, This case sends a powerful message: responsibility, ethics, and transparency are the bedrock of societal trust. Every person, whether an ordinary citizen or law enforcement, plays a role in protecting truth. When Janet was found after 42 years, it was not just a victory for science, but for faith in justice, that no matter how society changes, the law remains steadfast in protecting the vulnerable and respecting human life. In today's life, this lesson encourages each of us not to turn away from truth, not to ignore the unusual, and to believe that every good faith action, no matter how small, can contribute to a more enduring justice for America. Thank you for joining us in following the journey of bringing justice back after over 4 decades in the Janet Rosewood case, proof that truth never fades, only waits to be found. Please subscribe to the channel to not miss the next true crime stories, where the past speaks and justice never sleeps.